Hi, how you doing and welcome back to another video on the channel. What we have for you today is our early wildcard video going into game week 35, and me and myself, I will be wildcarding this game week as well. So the team we're going to talk about today is pretty much what I'm thinking of doing for my own team moving forward. If you are new to the channel, please do like and subscribe. Support is always appreciated. Been really cool recently with the comments and the questions. So thank you very much for that. Let's try and keep it going. Before we look at individual players, I'm going to look at teams to target. So when we're looking at these teams for the rest of the season, we know we've got doubles in game week 35 and 37. And that is really important to have players from those teams. But it's also important to consider other teams that maybe have either one double or maybe even no double game weeks, but have good fixtures elsewhere, because sometimes you can focus too much on the teams with double game weeks, and if they've not got very good fixtures in between, you're kind of putting all your eggs in that basket, and it is important to consider all 4 game weeks. So if we can find teams with doubles and good fixtures, that is fantastic. The first team we're going to look at is Man City. Now, they do double in 37, and even though those games are both away, and we don't really know if they might have wrapped up the Premier League season by then, so we don't quite know with rotation, I would have 1 or 2 Man City players in my wildcard team, mainly because of the good fixtures before and after the double as well. From an attacking point of view, you can bet anything that they're going to score against Forest, Wolves and West Ham, and you're pretty certain that they'll score against Fulham and Spurs as well. So with guaranteed goals as good as it gets, I would have 1 or 2 Man City attacking players in my team. The next team we're going to look at is Man United. Now, although their fixtures aren't perfect, I think Burnley and Palace, from a defensive point of view, look really good for Man United. I think one player from Man United is a good balance here. They do have 2 home games in the double, but Arsenal and Newcastle are tough games, and Man United have been pretty inconsistent as it stands. I think a cheap midfielder, maybe someone like Garnacho from Man United, would also fit quite well with this team. But I do think they are a team that do need consideration when you're on a wildcard. Now, the next team we're going to look at is Newcastle. Now, their fixtures are probably going to be the best in the league for the rest of the season. Sheffield United and Burnley, they don't come much better than the 2 bottom teams in the league. I think from an attacking point of view, Newcastle look really good, but also from a defensive point of view, I think they could keep clean sheets despite the injuries. Brighton and Man United are a good double, I think, on paper in game week 37, and that Brentford game to finish the season, that seems to me like a game where there could be a lot of goals. We all know at the end of the season, the final game week, you get some crazy scorelines, and I think this could be one of them. So we're going to talk about Spurs now, and I might as well also talk about Chelsea as well. The 2 teams who double in 35 and 37. Now, whilst it's important to have Spurs and Chelsea players, we do have to consider the fact they are really inconsistent. Now, I know double the games means double the chance of points, and if your defenders aren't really getting clean sheets either, then, if all defenders are getting 2 points per game, give or take, then you might as well have players that are going to get 4 points in a game week rather than just 2. The Spurs double of Arsenal and Chelsea, then Liverpool, and then Burnley and Man City. If you were to isolate those games into single game weeks, you'd say, right, Arsenal home, Chelsea away, Liverpool away, and then let's say Man City at home. That's a really tough run of games, and it does make a difference that they're doubling up. So I would have a couple of Spurs players in, but I would be careful in tying yourself down to too many from Spurs and Chelsea. Now, the Chelsea fixtures do look a little bit better. I think that West Ham game instead of that Liverpool game is a real swing in terms of players you can get in. And their second double in 37, whilst they're both away from home, Forest and Brighton are good teams to play. Especially at the end of the season, you would think Forest is probably going to be safe. Brighton probably don't have too much to play for. Like Chelsea could take advantage of those games. So let's take a look at the individual players, and we're going to start in goal. So I've decided to go with Onana. I think having a Man United defender is a good option with their fixtures moving forward. And Onana is someone who's really high up in the goalkeeper points tally. I think he's actually second in total points per game all season. And for me, he's someone that I've had in my team all season as well. And he does get a lot of save points for Man United. And if they do end up keeping a clean sheet, he'll get some bonus as well. The defensive, I've triple up that I've gone for is 2 Chelsea defenders with Palmer in midfield. I think Chelsea is worth the triple up more so than Spurs. I've gone with 2 attacking fullbacks here. Now, you could say maybe Cucurella is probably going to lose his place to Ben Chilwell, but for me, Chilwell's someone whose minutes is so inconsistent due to injuries, I probably would rely on Cucurella as well. And they're both at a price where you think if one of them did get benched and they're not playing for your team, you're not going to mind if you've got a 4.3 million or 4.8 million, respectively, defender on your bench. I think for me, Cole Palmer is an absolute must. I don't really see a team who's wildcarding right now who doesn't have Cole Palmer in. I think he just speaks for himself. Even if you're just getting him in right now at 6.2 million, he represents awesome value. So with Spurs, I've gone with the double up. I think like Palmer, you will struggle to see a team which doesn't have Son in it. I think Palmer and Son are going to be in everyone's teams, and if anyone recommends not getting either of those in, I don't really understand why they would say that. I think for me, Pedro Porro is someone who's attacking enough that he could nullify any risk of losing a clean sheet. I think if you do want Spurs players in, it's probably these two, but I wouldn't mind having someone like Van de Ven in if you're a bit strapped for cash with your team instead of Pedro Porro, maybe even Udogie as well if he is back playing regularly. So my next triple up that we're going to go with is Newcastle. Now, we spoke about their fixtures earlier, and to be honest, just like Palmer and Son, at the risk of being a bit too template here, I don't see a world where I don't have Alexander Isak in my wildcard team. He is really on form at the moment, and I know that Callum Wilson's coming back from injury, but Alexander Isak, it's his place to lose, and I just don't see Newcastle taking the risk of rotating him out unless he is either really tired or really injured, has a high injury risk. I think Gordon and Burn really do balance out the squad quite well because Newcastle's fixtures are handy and Gordon is someone who can go off for a lot of points, especially at home. I think their initial game against Sheffield United will provide some selection headaches because that is not a fixture you want Gordon on the bench for especially. So I am still sticking with an Arsenal double up here. Now their fixtures aren't great, but I do think that they are a solid team. Whether you want to value Saka as highly as I do, or you want to maybe go for a different Arsenal midfielder and give yourself some money elsewhere, that's fair enough. But I think Saka, for me, whilst his form has dipped off in recent weeks, he has been really consistent all season. Arsenal don't have anything else to consider in terms of games in the title running, so they can throw their best players into the league, so which does kind of increase Saka's minutes. And Gabriel for me is a really good value defender. We know Arsenal have the best defence in the league, so I think it makes sense to have a defender from the best defence. I'm still sticking with 2 Man City players here. Now, I've gone with Foden. If you look at Man City's midfielders, he is miles ahead of everyone else in terms of points. And just like Arsenal, I know they've still got the FA Cup, but Man City are going to get a bit tunnel vision with this league here now. And I think that Foden and Haaland are pretty much dead certs to start every game, injury pending, of course, in terms of the rest of the season until they win the league. Now, whether you think Salah is maybe a bit better than Haaland, I think that's fair enough, and maybe you put Salah in this team instead of Haaland, but I think midfield, there's a lot of better options than there is up front. I think, yeah, you might swap Salah instead of Saka if you wanted to, and then maybe you downgrade Haaland to someone else, maybe if Ivan Toney comes back or you like the look of Solanke, but I just think the midfield is a lot more packed for good options than in attack. Now, rounding out our 15, I've gone with Ollie Watkins. Now, whether you want Ollie Watkins in your team or not is up to you. You could maybe downgrade him to someone like João Pedro or Danny Welbeck, whichever one of those you prefer, because Brighton do have reasonable fixtures and a double in 37 with Newcastle away and Chelsea at home. But for me, Watkins is the joint highest point scorer at the moment with Cole Palmer for a reason. He has been so consistent all season. I don't really see a situation where I would take Watkins out, but I think if you were struggling for cash for your team, I think a Brighton attacker could be a good option here. Or we do have a really well-rounded bench. Maybe you just go for the cheapest striker you can find and play a 3-5-2 with Gordon in midfield instead. So as we said, this team rating is 99%, which is awesome. You really would struggle to find a better wildcard team on paper than this. The problem we do have is that its value is 104 million. Now, we've just talked about some cheaper options. I think if you are playing the game consistently at the moment and you're an engaged FPL manager, then 104 million shouldn't be too much of a stretch. But if it is, we've talked about, replacing players like Porro and Watkins maybe you downgrade Haaland as well. And the bench is definitely possible to sort of save some value in there as well and still have a really strong starting 11. So hopefully that will help you out with your own budget. So the strengths for me is that it sets up for the double in game week 35 and 37 quite well, whilst balancing some good single game week players in your squad. Now, when I was thinking about the weaknesses, you've got Chelsea and Spurs players in there, and whilst we can't avoid Chelsea and Spurs players, they do play for Chelsea and Spurs, and they are inconsistent teams. So I would bear that in mind. You're absolutely going to play them for the doubles, but with the fixtures in between, I think it's perfectly fine to rotate them out. And I would be cautious about going with a triple up from both, just because I've been there before and I've put all my eggs in that Spurs basket and it's not always gone well, or at very least, it's been quite stressful to get points. And having a well-rounded bench like we do does lead to selection headaches. So it's whether you think you want to take that risk, how good you think your judgment is for that. I'm not too sure. That's up to you. But I think at the moment, a well-rounded bench is a good option because we don't really know how rotation goes. Sometimes if teams have nothing to play for, they'll sort of rest players or they'll give different players options to play, or someone comes off early. So I do think it's good to have backup in your squad just in case. So yeah, let me know what you think about my team. This is at the moment what I'm going for, but like we said with the free hit last week, there's lots of different options we can take, and I'm not got my heart fully set on this team as it stands. So yeah, let me know if you're wildcarding and if there's anyone I've missed. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next one.